Alrighty. Hi everyone. All right. We're getting started. I'm so excited. I'm so excited about this live. We're live. Yay. Dr. Funke Afolabi Brown, the founder of Restful Sleep MD, and you are in for a treat today. You get not just one, but two pediatric pulmonologists and sleep physicians. And I am going to have Dr. Canapari join us. Okay, I see the request. Let's go. And we'll get started. I think he should. There we go.
Hello!
I love it. I love it. I love it.
I was super worried I was going to mess this up. Hold on, I got to turn my volume here.
Okay. I know you're, I'm hearing you. You're coming out loud and clear. It's good. It's good. It's good.
Let me just adjust this. I'm down with the comments. That's where I'm living.
You are good. 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 So we're going to keep an eye out on the comments because I think there's going to be a lot of questions and there's going to be engagement and we're going to pull out some special prizes at the end. So I think this is really exciting. All right. So
I'm excited too. This is a good way to end the week.
I know.
Do something fun.
I know. How was your week, though? How was your week?
I think like many parents and people in the world, we're dealing with COVID right now, right?
Yeah.
We sort of thought I felt like in the fall, like things were getting
Yeah.
better. And then I don't know how it was down in Pennsylvania. It was the week before Christmas, all of a sudden it got really crazy.
Oh,
And
yeah.
now, based on some hospital data that I've seen, it looks like in Connecticut, we're a little bit past the peak.
Oh,
I don't know how it is for you guys.
we're kind of there. We're still there, but like I think as at like sometime like last week, we had almost 100 patients. So it was
Like
pretty
kids?
yeah.
Wow.
Yes, it was pretty insane. And granted, of course, quite a number of them were actually incidental findings. So in the sense that they may not
Sure.
necessarily even have come in with symptoms, and then we found they were positive. But still, it's been quite crazy. And around Christmas as well, around the holidays, there were a lot of people that couldn't, that were sick or families were sick. So there was a bit of a stretch in terms of coverage. But I would say it's getting a little bit better, but it's still quite intense. But you know what? Let's get started, okay? How
Yeah.
about you
You know what? But
introduce? Yeah.
it is so germane to a lot of the people in our audience, because if you are a
Yes.
parent of a young child, especially if your child's too young to be vaccinated, things are
Yeah.
getting disrupted. Or if your kid is in childcare,
Hmm.
it's really anxiety provoking, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
if your kid's school closes and you have to work, like then what do you do?
Exactly. I
It's
think
crazy.
it's I think it's essentially something that could completely shut down the nation. Like I have families who, both parents are working, schools are closed, someone gets sick. No one, of course, is going to be able to watch the kids at home. And, it becomes this huge dilemma. They can't show up at work. You need coverage at work and things like that. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think that was also part of why I felt, this would be something worth talking about, how sleep has been impacted by all of this. And so, by way of introduction, again, hi everyone. My name is Funke Afolabi Brown. I am a pediatric pulmonologist and a sleep medicine physician and the founder of Restful Sleep MD, where I help busy parents and their children prioritize sleep. And I have the very one and only Dr. Craig Canapari here. And so, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm thrilled to be here with you, Funke. Thank you for inviting me. I'm a pediatric sleep doc and pulmonologist at Yale, and I am just so pleased to have a fellow sleep doctor out there, kind of spreading the good word about sleep and what parents can do. Because I was just talking with a colleague today, is that so many, and I think this is why one of the reasons I was interested in pediatric sleep and why
Mm-hmm.
I exist online and why I wrote a book is that so much of the medical system now is really about dealing with disease, right? In well child care, and I have a lot of good friends who are primary care uh, doctors. So much of primary care now is the primary care doctors have to cover so many topics. Um, and they don't, sleep issues tend to be very time and counseling intensive. Um, and yet, if you come to my clinic or your clinic, we're dealing with a lot of disease, right? We're dealing with patients often with complicated, not always, but often with complicated medical problems. But so many parents are struggling with these issues that maybe fall within the realm of normal development or developmental challenges, and yet they're really time intensive for providers to take on. And in the internet era, parents are confronted with a lot of conflicting information about what should you do, when should you sleep train, should you sleep train, is crying it out safe, etc. And it's really hard to know where to turn. So I feel it's important for physicians and medical providers in general to try to have our voices be part of the conversation, and to really listen to what parents have to say, not just to talk, but to also listen.
Yep. Yep. I totally agree with you. And I think, one of the things you also mentioned is the time, right? There is, especially when you're a child is at the well child check, there's so many things going on that sleep eventually potentially becomes this checkbox, like, okay, you have a sleep problem, yes or no, and that's pretty much it. But there's so much more that's going on, like you and I see. And then the problem also is the fact that there are not that many people that are doing what you and I are doing, right? So my wait times in clinic is just horrendous, right?
Yeah. We have major workforce problems in pediatric pulmonology and pediatric sleep. So if any of you out there are pediatric residents, come do a rotation with us. Look at the field. It's tremendously rewarding, and there really is a lot of need right now.
Yeah. And I think the other piece of it is that it's you're not only helping the child sleep better, you're helping the parents sleep better, right? That's one of the things I'm hearing constantly. If the child is not sleeping, if the baby is not sleeping, of course, guess who else is up all night? And so I think this is
and you know what?
such a big
The
deal.
toddler isn't like driving to work or giving presentations or driving airplanes or like doing all of these things. So a lot of the communication that I think especially moms get is, well, you have to do everything no matter the cost to your health or your well-being. And there is a way to work on your child's sleep. And it's very acceptable to say that I need to sleep better. Yeah, I mean, obviously we can't talk about specifics, but younger kids can understand, be like, well, you know what, mommy's pretty tired.
Yeah.
Babies don't always, but if a parent out there is really struggling with whether or not to try to work on their child's sleep, I would say that you are going to be a better parent. If you are well rested, you're going to be happier, and your child's going to be happier too. So don't beat yourself up if you're considering some of these interventions. And there's lots of different ways to improve your child's sleep. If one method feels uncomfortable as a parent, there are other ways you can try.
And I think that's just the beauty of it. And that's one thing I put in on the post I put out, like there's no one way. And I think you said that in your book. And so this is going to be a great segue to your book and some of the questions I got already about sleep training. There's no one way. The way that works is the way that gets you and your child some sleep. Sure. And so I think really reassuring yourself of that, you're not going to mess it up. You're going to try a couple of things if you have to, but you find what works for you. So let's go right straight in. Can you what was the inspiration behind It's Not Too Late to Sleep Train Your Child, your book, which is phenomenal, by the way. And there is going to be a giveaway for the person that's most engaged.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. You know what? like you, I'm a pulmonologist. In my research and fellowship, like when I was doing my sleep training, was in sleep apnea and obesity, very technical stuff. But I was fortunate that I worked with Judy Owens, who is, I think, now the head of sleep medicine at Boston Children's Hospital. And Judy is really focuses on behavioral sleep medicine. As a pulmonologist, working with behavioral problems was somewhat foreign to me. And I felt like I really needed to educate myself about this. Like, both as a parent, because my older son was born 2007 when I finished fellowship, and as a provider. So I started, when I was researching behavioral topics, I was writing handouts for parents. I'm like, oh, this would be fun to just publish this on the internet. So I just started a website with the very creatively named drcraigcanapari.com. I'm always like, I don't know, should I come up with something clever? And that led to just me kind of feeling like, well, I've created this body of work. A certain segment of people seem to like what I have to say in my tone, and I decided to write a book, and my focus was on a couple of things. I think first off, we all in medicine stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And I've had the good fortune to have spent a little bit of time with Richard Ferber. I loved Weisswolf's books, and there's a reason these books continue to sell. So the question is always, well, what do I have to add? And I felt like those books kind of read to me almost like encyclopedias of sleep. Like it is literally every problem you can imagine from birth to your child's lifespan. And I'm like, people are tired, and I wanted to write a short, easy to read book on the topic of my kid won't fall asleep, my kid won't stay asleep. What can I do to address this as quickly and painlessly as possible? So when I was researching things, I found the framework of thinking about the psychology of habit to be a really useful framework. That so much of the behavior that we do, like look as a parent, how often do we have the same fights over and over with our kids? Or our spouse? I mean, I don't know if mine is watching or not. And you have these areas of conflict in your life, and they happen almost without intention or without your, you don't mean to, but you're having the same arguments over and over. So let's say that your kid wakes up every night and comes in your room. This is a common thing that we see, and gets into bed with you. And then your child falls asleep immediately, but then you're awake for an hour and a half, and you're worrying about all the stuff that's going on in the world and what you have to do the next day.
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, it's incredibly familiar for all of us. And so we break that down with the habit psychology. The trigger is your child having a natural physiologic awakening. We all wake up all the time at night. We mostly don't remember it. But then your child has learned a behavior. The behavior is, oh, when I wake up, I go find mom or dad, and I get into bed with them. And that is, the reward is the most powerful reward for a child can get, attention from mom or dad. There's nothing better than that. Lollipops, sticker charts, none of this is as good as attention from mom or dad. And that's why people were like, oh, my kid sleeps great for the babysitter. They don't have this problem at grandma's house, or they sleep great in daycare, but they won't do it for me. And the difference is your time is so much more valuable to your child than any other thing, any other reward they can get. I think the other part of the habit loop is you have your own habit, which is the trigger for your habit is your kid showing up. Your behavior is saying, just climb in here with me because I can't deal right now. And your reward is you don't have an argument with your kid. So you actually have two interlocking habits there. And you have to think about, like, how do you change your own behavior to change your child's behavior? And everybody's got to, in that example, it would be like I think the first thing would be identifying is like, well, this is a pattern, and we have to change the reward for this child. And often, for this situation, for older kids who fall asleep independently, and Funke, I'm curious what you say. I'm usually like, well, you identify this problem, you can talk with your child and be like, well, I'm really tired and I need you to not wake me up at night. Because really the problem is waking you up. So you can either have a separate sleeping service in your room where your child can stay, or you can do what Mark Weisswolf calls the silent return. You take your child back to the room and you don't offer this big tearful farewell or lie down with him. And they might come out a bunch of times, but eventually you just, the behavior will go away. And if you decide to let your child fall asleep in your room, the key is they can't wake you up. Because if they wake you up, well, they got to go back to their room, right? Because
Yep.
it's a great, I think, lesson to teach your child is that everyone has to set appropriate limits about, if your child is sick, if your child is in distress, you're going to do it. But if your child is just kind of used to doing this, it's okay to want it to change. That's not to
Yep.
say if it doesn't bother you, you don't have to change it. There's no moral layer to this.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I think what you said is so true. That attention can either be good or bad. It could be some kind of emotion that they're evoking from you as a parent. They'll thrive on that, right? And so you get this feedback loop, right? So I think for me, things like having that mattress just or some kind of or like blankets on the floor in the parents' room is totally fine. Again, it all depends on where the family is. Sometimes parents are just so exhausted that it's like, okay, as long as they're not getting into bed with you, they lay in bed with you. But for some, they're like, listen, I want my space back. And then we go, okay,
Totally.
the silent walk back. Or I think also, sometimes the reward system, depending on the child. I think one of the things I definitely hear is, oh yeah, we do treats and then they just done. They're not interested in those treats anymore or whatever. And that's where you need to get kind of creative and
Sure.
mix things up. But I love prefacing it with the fact that, listen, I'm teaching you boundaries. We all talk about our boundaries and being able to say no and really setting limits around our lives. And so really starting to teach our kids that even at an early age is great. And it's something that they'll see that you are modeling as well. And, that's in and of itself, for me, I'm not like a fan. When you hear sleep training, some people shy away and think, oh my gosh, it's like
Oh
we're
yeah.
going to the barracks. It's just really helping your child develop a skill that every child can have. And so whether you're at that point where you've been, trying to get your child to sleep on their own since they were a baby and you felt like you missed some window, some arbitrary window or the other, and now you have your toddler that really wants to sleep with you, it's never too late. It's never too late. And it's really teaching them a skill that they'll take on for the rest of their lives.
Well, it's funny. I originally did not want sleep training in the title of my book because everybody hates the term, right? Like,
I don't think
a subset of the internet is coming with the torches and the pitchfork when you even say the word sleep training. And my agent was like, no, I wanted to call the book The Bedtime Habit, which I think is cool. But
Oh,
someone in the agency who's like a big nonfiction agent, she's like, people aren't going to know what the book's about. Put sleep
exactly.
training in the title. So I'm like, I've come around to it, but the term does have a certain valence, and I think you're exactly right. Cry It Out is one specific flavor of sleep training. It's not right for every family. It's certainly not right for a 3-year-old, right? Or a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old. So I think that we just, it's funny in the adult world, we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and that doesn't have any sort of scary, people just don't know what it means. It sounds like gibberish, right? Like CBT. But that's what we're, cognitive behavioral therapy is about treating someone to change the way they're thinking about sleep and the way they're behaving around sleep. And sleep training is simply changing the parent's behavior to shape the behavior of the child. And I love that term, like Alan, I'm blanking on his name. He's a big behaviorist at Yale. Talks about shaping behavior, right? Like
Mm.
your child's behavior is not going to be perfect day 1 or day 2, but you're shaping it and moving it. And that's the chore of parenting, right? You are shaping your child's behavior by encouraging them with the things that you like and perhaps teaching them that some of the things that they do that aren't working well for you, to pick alternatives that are different.
Yep. And that is true. So that's one of the terms we'll hear. And so I'll then now transition. Honestly, Craig, when I look at this, I'm like, we could literally do like a series with all the questions that came in. But
Sure.
a lot of the a lot of the trends that I got from people that reached out to me, and thank you for those who did. And if you have any questions, do post in the comments. I will try to take them as well. And remember, if you do get as engaged as possible, you might be walking away with a book today. So yes, yes, yes. So one of the questions that was asked was regarding timing or the age when you should consider starting to promote those healthy sleep habits and independent sleep, aka sleep training in kids.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that it's funny. Like I remember, like about 5 or 6 years ago, there was an article, I think it was the New York Times, about a practice in New York City that was promoting like cardiac sleep training at like a month or two of age, and I was, I at first I couldn't put my finger on why this bothered me, because I didn't really think it was a great fit. And I was really sort of developmentally, we know that babies aren't built to go for extended periods without attention or feeding at such a young an age. But what parents can do at that age is working towards a bedtime routine. Because parents, I'm gonna be real with you guys for a second. I know you're tired, I'm tired too. And the things that we do every day are the things that we don't always have to think about. So like if you're like, okay, here's my kid's bedtime routine. I'm gonna give him a bath. We're gonna read a story. I'm gonna sing a song. He's gonna go to bed. He's a month old, so I'm just gonna rock him to sleep. Okay, well you don't have to think about it. You know what to do. That's totally a great like adaptive behavior. And I mean, everybody remembers the first kid. My wife and I would give my first son both the bath at the same time. We'd read stories together, sing songs. The second kid, we're like, okay, you do this, you take care of this kid, I'm gonna take care of that kid. Like, and it's just, the more kids you have, the more like you kind of build in these, like, this efficiency. And, but it is funny when you think about how much more bandwidth you have with your first kid. You're like, oh my God, we're gonna do all of this together. The second kid, where you're like, it's perfectly okay to be like, mom's like, I'm going out, dad, you deal with this. And moms, if you're out there, I guess you can't go out as much as you would like necessarily, but it is perfectly okay also to sometimes articulate to your partner that you need, if there are two parents in the household, because there aren't two parents in every household, right? But to advocate that everybody should have a role here to play.
Yep. I totally agree with that. And that guilt trip, you just have to kind of try to eliminate it, like because the mental health for you as a mom is so important that needs to be prioritized, and really leveraging the help that you have to be able to get a little bit of a break, to be able to tag team and things like that. So one other question that's here is, what about sleep pressure in that first year of life? Like, what was the question? It was talking about the fact that how does their homeostatic drive, children under one, how does that change, and how does that impact like their wake windows and the times they should take naps and things like that?
It's funny. We have a couple of questions that I think kind of tie into this. And I'm I am terrible at using this window here.
Okay, so
and we have one parent who's asking about a kid staying up really late at night. And how to adjust that. Another kid dealing with like sort of early morning awakenings. And I think those sort of kind of tie into the issue of what you're referring to, which is sleep drive. Like, in sleep doctor school, we're taught about this thing called the 2-process model, which is, why do you fall asleep at a given time and why do you wake up? So homeostatic sleep drive is super easy to understand. In general, the longer you're awake, the more likely you are to fall asleep. And so, we'll see in a teenager, if they sleep in, they take a long nap in the afternoon, then they're going to have problems falling asleep at night. And sleep drive accumulates much more quickly in little babies than it does in you or me. That's why babies are sleeping 3 or 4 nap times a day, and we generally don't need to nap under normal circumstances. Where it gets tricky is when we bring in the other process, which is the circadian process, right? And there's a lot of nuance to this, but one of the things a parent said to me, I'll never forget, she's like, my son has to go to sleep at 7:30 at night, or he is up till 9, and there is nothing in between. And a really smart sleep doctor named Peretz Levy coined this term called the forbidden zone, which is that period of increased wakefulness we get from the body clock or the circadian clock at the end of the day. Where if you've ever been lying down with your kid at like 7:30 or 8, you're like, I could go to bed right now as soon as they're done. And then you push through and you're folding laundry and watching Netflix, and all of a sudden it's 11:30 and you're like, I'm wide awake. Well, you're in that zone. And for the mom who is, and I'm sorry, I can't see the whole thing anymore, whose child is staying up super late, I think that really sitting down with your pediatrician and kind of tracking your child's sleep schedule, including what a mentor of mine called sneaky sleep during the day, falling asleep in the car, like on the way to daycare, in the stroller, etc., and seeing, well, if the sleep duration over the day is within the normal range for a child your age, then maybe you need to get rid of some of that extra sleep during the day. Some kids really do need less sleep than others. And for something like that, working either with a sleep doctor or a sleep consultant or even your pediatrician, but the first step is tracking it, right? To understand where might the sleep pressure be being taken away.
Yep.
And often it's like you pick your kid up at daycare at 4:30 or 5 and they're asleep, and you can't wake them up when you get home, and then they're up till super late. That's one I hear a lot. The early morning awakenings is another sticky wicket. And I'm wondering, what do you do when a parent comes in and is like, my kid gets up at 4:30 in the morning every morning, and I am at my wit's end? Because nobody should be up at 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah. So it depends. If it's again, I'm very cautious about that, the sneaky naps or the sneaky sleep. And so that's something I try to make sure that we address. And it turns out a lot of times, either the kids are taking long naps than they should for their age during the day, and that impacts it. And sometimes, interestingly enough, I see that sometimes when kids are going to bed really late, because sometimes the parents are thinking, oh, maybe if I put them to bed later, they won't wake up as early. And so sometimes I'll kind of try to flip them to the other end of that forbidden zone. So just before, that helps.
And those later bedtimes, really, they don't work like tomorrow. They work really slowly over time. Absolutely.
And then the other piece is, it depends on what, sometimes I had a kid, and again, just for those of you that are on here, this is not direct medical advice. We're giving scenarios, okay? If you have any questions specific to your child, we'll try to kind of give you a sense of what to do here, but you should discuss this with your pediatrician. But I had, I had a kid who had a whole box of Legos in his room, and so in the morning was waking up at 4:30. Because of the Legos. So, just kind of making some changes. Let's move those Legos out of that room. Move any toys or anything exciting out of the room. That was something we did. And while they were working on, ensuring that, he wasn't taking naps during the day and things like that. So we kind of had like a two-pronged approach. So really, I think the key, like you mentioned, is tracking. Tracking is so important. And that tracking is not just over a couple of days, because things will change, preferably over about a week or two. Then you'll start to see like flags, you start to see like patterns, and then you'll be able to say, oh, okay, this is what's going on, and this is when he really has those awakenings early in the morning.
Chris Winter just published a pretty good sleep book. And I saw an advanced copy, just about different sleep problems in childhood. And he was talking about the normal range of sleep is pretty wide for kids, right? Like for infants, we think a normal sleep range in the first month of your life is 12 to 20 hours, right? And where your child falls in that distribution is pretty set. So if your kid doesn't need a lot of sleep, and if they're sleeping 12 hours when they're a month of age, they're not in a row, right? So a lot of times we'll see kids come to the sleep clinic, and if they're functioning great during the day, they're developing normally, they just don't need as much sleep as other kids their age. And sleep diaries help us recognize that and make guidance. And like sometimes, the thing, Legos in the room don't worry me as much as like the iPad, right? The morning
Yeah.
iPad's like the kiss of death. Your kid's going to get up earlier and earlier if the iPad is available.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been there, if you're jet lagged, giving your kid the iPad. There's another question here from Amansi. Does waking and bringing to bed for breastfeeding encouraging early wake times? What's your take on this?
Let's see. I missed that question.
Yeah, no, they come fast and furious, and now I touched it.
I
It seemed
know.
to kind of
I'm right.
pause.
I'm at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think so what is waking
Does
and
waking and
bringing
bringing to bed for breastfeeding encourage early wake time?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think so. I think it depends on what context, like an earlier wake time. Sometimes, though, I think one, of course, depends on the age of the child. So if you have a newborn that you need to bring to nurse, I don't believe that should have an impact. If you do have a child that's older, or older, more than a year old already, and they're having frequent wakenings, they don't have any issues with weight gain, they're thriving okay, you could definitely work on starting to back off on frequent nighttime feeds.
Well, and you know what, I think that there's a couple of parts to this movie. First of all, many mothers struggle with nighttime feedings, and especially working moms, because that's a really special time with their child. And I'd say, first of all, if feeding your child at night is something that gives you joy and is not really affecting your sleep adversely, that is totally fine. I think that, I remember being taught by Judy Owens, like, kids who get up really early, sometimes that's a flavor of what we call sleep onset association disorder, right? So that's a fancy way of saying is, your child falls asleep under a certain set of circumstances. When they have natural awakenings at night, they're going to look for the same thing, right? So typically, when we fall asleep, a little kid might have an hour or two of very deep sleep. So this is like you're driving home from grandma's on Christmas Eve. You take your kid out of the car, they don't wake up. You put them in bed, and you're like, oh my God, they didn't wake up. They're in that really deep sleep. Then they're going to have periods of REM every couple of hours during the night. REM sleep is like dream sleep. If you wake up from it is dream sleep. If you wake up from a dream, you're wide awake. So that's when your kid's going to look around and be like, oh, mom always nurses me to sleep. So I would like to be nursed now so I can go back to sleep. So if you're struggling with early morning awakenings and you're frequently getting up and nursing your child during the night every time they wake up, and they're at an age where they don't necessarily need the calories anymore, addressing that nighttime awakening might be a step that you need to take to have your child extend their sleep time in the morning. But of course, especially with nursing issues, I'm like, it's so important to talk to your pediatrician, talk to a lactation consultant, and also if you're a working mom, you have an older infant or a toddler, and that's the only time you're breastfeeding, just recognize that cutting that back could lead to weaning. And if you're not ready for that to happen, it may not be the right time.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that in terms of that association and the sleep associations. You could get really early during that infant stage, and you can also have it even in toddlers and things like that. And there's a question I'll answer right after. If you are that mom and you don't feel like you're ready to give up nursing yet, you may just need to make some changes around when you're nursing your baby to sleep, such that the baby is not falling asleep on the breast, because that association, the last thing they remembered was they were being nursed and they fell into sleep. And so those associations form. And we all have those some form of association or the other. Like for me, it's my satin pillow. And so if, for example, the last
satin
time
pillow,
I went to
wow.
Okay, so if I, for example, I went to bed and I had that pillow on and I wake up, like we all have those cycles and we all wake up through the night and my pillow falls, I'm going to wake up and grab it because that's what I'm going to need to continue my sleep. So in terms of trying to break that association, even if you want to still nurse, at times nursing them right at the beginning of the routine may be helpful in breaking that cycle. So the last thing they remember is not that they were nursed to sleep. And that's something that I feel helps. Now, for the 3-year-old, though, who is unable to fall asleep by herself when she wakes up after a REM sleep or, her sleep cycle, it's kind of similar in the sense of you have to go back to the beginning of the night. What did she need to be able to fall asleep? Did she fall asleep with someone next to her? In which case, did that person leave right after she fell asleep? So those are associations that might need to be worked on. And usually, sometimes I don't even bother trying to fix the middle of the night wake-ins if that association is still there right at the beginning, because it's hard to teach in the middle of the night.
And
Right?
I could not agree more, because I feel like as a parent, you're going to get the highest yield from a bedtime intervention anyway. And let's be real, 2 or 3 in the morning, we're not always, we're just trying to survive. I mean, like, I remember as a resident, you get those phone calls, you're like, I'm just trying to survive. And being the difference between being a resident and being a parent is that when you're a parent, you're on call every night, right?
Exactly.
As a resident, every it's only every 3 or 4 nights. I don't even think it's every. When I was a resident, sometimes it was every 3 nights. I don't think that happened as
No. We don't do that anymore.
And this is what I like, and this is the challenge, I think, when you write a book or you exist online versus working with someone in the office, is like, I think it's something that's so important that we deal with too, is that so much of traditional guidance presupposes, say, the child has their own room, or that there are other caregivers in the house. And the fact is, often I see families where the parents, multiple family members are sharing a room, or there's only one parent in the home, or situations like where a parent is working second shift and have to pick up their child from grandma's house, and then comes home late at night. And the fact is, you have to meet people where they live, right?
Absolutely.
But really, sleep is it is a really important issue when we think about health equity. I don't know, this is something we're talking about all the time in healthcare, and it's really overdue, is that I saw a sleep epidemiologist talk about how bad sleep is caused by families who are disadvantaged socioeconomically. Like, if you live in a place where the walls are thin, or there's a lot of light pollution, et cetera, and then it perpetuates it, because people have problems functioning the next day because their sleep is poor. They can't always meet their child's sleep needs. And it really is such a, we all need to sleep, right? Like, it's like drinking clean water, eating good food. And I think creating a society which allows people the opportunity to sleep well is really important.
Absolutely. No, that is so true. And speaking of light and noise pollution, I'm at a question here by Light Tuber 19, who says, my son is 8. He likes organ music blaring and lights going on to sleep. Seems to be working for him fine, but I would rather break this habit as it's not good sleep hygiene. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that I think that certainly a good rule of thumb, and I don't think I came up with this one, was it shouldn't be light enough to read in your child's room at night. Because we know that a lot of, darkness is like kind of a natural process. And many children do struggle with fear of the dark. There's actually a great book called Uncle Lightfoot, if you have an older kid, The Fear of the Dark, that talks about different ways to help a child cope with fear of the dark. But I often say for parents, well, you can, if it's just a regular light bulb, you could drop the wattage in the light bulb. If it's a lamp, you could put it behind a piece of furniture because it's less of that direct light coming in. The organ music is kind of cool, like, just to think about.
I know, right?
But I think that I do think about like light, like sound, perhaps affecting sleep quality, even if your kid's not waking up during the night. That we hear a loud noise, etc. Like there are experiments that show that, like, you're in a lighter stage of sleep, or you might see more arousals. But often the name of the game is, like, first of all, you don't want to self-inflict a wound here, right? Like, I wouldn't go cold turkey if things are kind of working for you, but maybe work towards reducing the light exposure by where you talk about turning down the volume. Do it gradually. And I will say children with, I don't know the details of this situation, children with sensory issues or autism or something like that, sometimes do have some very specific needs or preferences. And working with an occupational therapist can really help with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's a great one. And also sometimes if your child needs that like background noise, replacing it with something that has just like that one pitch, so
Yeah.
you're not having those fluctuations in the volume and things like that. So either a noise machine or an old fan or something like that, if they'll be amenable. And then I have a comment here, I guess, or maybe some tips you have for the Chidima Collective, who says, I have a 5-month-old. I am so tired. What would you say to her? Thanks for joining is all I could tell you for sure for start.
I would say I feel you, and I have been there myself, and I think that the first step to take, look, not to borrow from 12-step programs, which are great for people, but I'm like, the first step is acknowledging you have a problem, right? And I think that to say, I am not tired and this is not working for me, that is how this begins, right? That's how fixing the problem begins, is to say, you know what? I'm working, I'm going to assume this is a mom, because many of the people we have on Instagram are, but moms, dads, whoever you are, caregivers, grandparents, it's really hard, right? Like having a young child is really hard. And, to really sit down and unpack, like what's your biggest pain point? Where are you struggling the most? But I'd say for most parents is looking at bedtime, figuring out a plan to work towards independent sleep at bedtime, is the way that you're going to get out of this. But also too, if you're really struggling, checking with your pediatrician, making sure your child is growing well. And there's no sort of, I'm not saying there's anything terribly wrong with your child, but sometimes there's some low-hanging fruit. Eczema, acid reflux, constipation. Addressing these issues usually is not that difficult, and can really, if you have them and that's the cause, all the sleep training in the world is not going to work. And if you address them, sometimes it's, there's not always a quick fix, but sometimes there can be.
Yep. So I hope that helps. So one quick question. From the list I've gotten before, what's your favorite method of sleep training?
Sure. I mean, yeah. I don't know. It's like there are a bunch of them. I think that's a super important message, right? Like,
yeah.
I differentiate between, and it's very simplistic, but like kids in cribs versus kids in beds, right? First of all, like, can they show up in your room in the middle of the night? That's maybe a different set of problems. I mean, we've all had like, I feel like in a horror movie, you wake up and your child is staring at you, and like they haven't touched you, they're just silently staring at you. I mean,
yes.
Throw us a like if that's happened to you, because it's creepy. But
it's happened to me. Yeah.
But I think in infancy, the two big ones for me are, the various flavors of Cry It Out. They do work. They work quicker than you think you're going to do, but they don't work for every family, right? It's not always in keeping with parents' values. Though I will say that they're safe. And then I think it was Harry Hiscock that talked about kind of the chair method, or, I think she called it camping out, of like staying in your child's room and kind of gradually moving yourself out over a week or two, how close you are to your child. The key with that method, moms and dads, is you absolutely can't do that in the middle of the night, right? Like, if you're like sitting for 20 or 30 minutes waiting for your kid to fall asleep, I do not expect you to go sit in the chair for 20 or 30 minutes every time your kid wakes up at night. Just do what you need to do to get them to go back to sleep. Yep. Because that takes a little bit more time. In older kids, and this is really actually one of the ways I wanted to write my book, because I feel like there's a lot of infant sleep training information out there. And I think infant sleep training is relatively straightforward, although not easy, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's hard, but it's simple. There's just a few techniques. We get into like things like napping and, terms I don't love, honestly, like regression and wake windows and stuff like that. There's maybe a little bit more nuance to it. in older kids, there's a lot more, actually, I think, kind of fun methods you could do to really, that's when you can really start thinking about changing habit loops and rewarding behavior you do like, as opposed to extinction or cry it out is ignoring behavior you don't like. Rewarding behavior you do like is methods like, taking a break, which is where you just take short little, if your kid's used to having you fall asleep, you take, say your child needs you to fall asleep. They fall asleep at 8:30 every night and lights out is at 8. You leave the room at 8:15 for 1 minute. You come back, you're like, oh my God, you're doing such a great job. Look how calm you are. You lie down with them, you go back to sleep. Then you increase that interval over time to capture that magic moment where your child falls asleep on their own. And it's like you're teaching them to build the muscle of independence around sleep time. But there's lots of different ways to do this. And like, it's going to depend on your child, your values as a parent, and what you feel like you have the bandwidth to do. And I think for some people, they're also like, maybe, my 2-year-old comes and nurses every night and my mom friends are giving me a hard time about this. And I'm like, well, if someone asked me, I'm like, well, how do you feel in the morning? I'm like, I feel great. My kid's great. I'm like, don't worry about it. There's no moral, there's no moral dimension to this here. Like, it doesn't make you a good or bad parent to try to sleep train or not sleep train your child. I just feel like if you're struggling, it doesn't make you a bad parent to want to change it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that is so true. Okay, so believe it or not, we're 45 minutes in. So I have a few more questions here. Sandrita Yvette said, I have a question about my soon-to-be 3-year-old. He's up until 2 a.m., wakes up at 8:30, naps at 1 p.m., and wakes up at 3 p.m. How is he staying up until 2 to 3 a.m.?
Man, I'll tell you here, I know what to do here. And it's like, the nap needs to go.
Yeah, it's like, a long nap.
Big time. That may not get you all the way, but I feel like this is a classic presentation of a child that is ready to give up the nap. And it's not like your 3-year-old is like, hey, mom, it's going to be cool. I'm not going to nap anymore. Right? Like, when they stop napping, it stinks, right? Like, they don't nap. And they're miserable, and they're fussing, and some days they nap, and then bedtime's a mess, and then sometimes they don't nap, and they're like, is it okay for him to go to bed at 6 o'clock? But I'd say that step one is like, no more nap. True story. When we got rid of my younger son's pacifier at age 3, he did not say it, but his actions said to me, "We'll be like, oh, you're going to do this. That's okay. I am no longer napping from this day forward." So that was the price we paid for giving up the binky, was no more napping. And I think I have 2 boys. They're 3 years apart. I think I had 1 month where they napped at the same time. It was absolute bliss. I think fondly of those days.
All the way back then.
Yeah, it was a long time. It was a long time ago. It was probably about 11 years ago at this point, but it was awesome.
And you still remember.
I still remember. Maybe 10 years ago. I don't know.
All right. So I hope that helps. That nap is long. That nap probably needs to go. And you may need to cut back a little. If you feel like it's going to be too drastic, you may need to shorten it and just help him build that sleep pressure like we talked about earlier. Okay. So Bell and Don says Dr. Canapari is an absolute genius, fabulous in this field. How do you extend wake up time? If a child wakes up at 4:30 or 5, how do we work towards a later wake time?
It's brutal, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you do in your clinic when someone comes in with a story like this?
So again, this is back to how old, depending on this particular situation. Sure. I think a lot of things you're stepping back and saying, how is this impacting the child? So, again, tracking that over time. Is he exhausted during the day, or is he like completely happy, and sure, nothing else is going on? It's only that it bothers you or whatever. Is he taking long naps? And then what time is the bedtime? So is it too early versus too late? So those are some of the things that I try to answer. Is there an incentive for the child to wake up so early? during the day, in the morning. So those are some things that you need to really kind of play through and kind of look through and see, and that will really help you determine where you need to take action. Again, think about it. Even though we say, oh yes, school age children should sleep 9 to 11 hours, or whatever it is, your child may need a little bit less of that spectrum. The important thing is, how are they functioning during the day? So that at times really helps to play, that plays a role into how you really kind of address that.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is that, like, is there a sleep onset association at bedtime, right? Like, because when we think about sleep pressure, right, your child's sleep pressure is a lot lower at 4:30 in the morning than it is in the middle of the night. So, especially if your child's irritable during the day, and your child needs you to fall asleep at bedtime, I would address that. That might take you there. And the other thing you mentioned so important is, like, what is the incentive? I very clearly remember when my younger kid, who was a notorious early riser, he used to give it, we went through a period where he was getting at 4:30 every day. He was like 6 or 7 months of age. I remember we took a trip to Disney World and literally watching the dawn over the lagoon, because, like, I didn't want to wake up my wife and other son in the hotel room. So I'd hear him and I'd just, like, scoop him up and run out the door. And for a while, I would literally lie him on the floor and then lie next to him with a pillow and blanket and pitifully try to sleep. And we used to call it face hands, because what he would do is stick his hands in my nostrils and mouth. So it was, like, not the greatest sleep. And eventually, what we ended up doing was he was falling asleep independently, and we just sort of, I stopped laying down with him or giving, and we started just slowly increasing the time when we would get him out of the room. And he fussed a little bit, but for an older child, if in the condition of sleep sufficiency, say your child is just naturally an early riser, you know what? It's going to be great for them when they hit high school and they have no problems getting up at 6 in the morning. But right now it's painful. The 3 or 4-year-old, encouraging your child to have adaptive behaviors like playing quietly in the room, like something like an okay to wake clock. Your child can't control when they fall asleep. Neither can you or I. Like, if someone said to me, be like, Canapari, I've got an offer for you. I'm going to give you $1 million if you can fall asleep in the next minute. Be like, can I do that? Absolutely not. It's not how sleep works. We can control breathing. We can control what we eat. I mean, more or less, right? Like, not always, but, like, you can take a big breath or a small breath. But in terms of sleep onset, you can just kind of set the conditions for sleep. And I think that, like, your child may not, you can get angry sometimes, but your child can't control when they wake up. But especially for an older kid, to be like, okay, well, you know what, mommy or daddy, we're pretty tired, so it's okay for you to be awake, but you can look at your books or play quietly in your room. And when this light goes out, you can just get, like, a night light and put it on, like, a timer. Like, you can come and get us, okay? And even have it be a little bit different from the weekends. And again, we're teaching children to model our behavior, right? That, like, we can't always, things we can control are not when we sleep or when we wake up, but it's how we act around them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is so good. And also the point you made earlier on as well about the sleep association. That's a big one to pay attention. Maybe very subtle, where you may think that you are already out of the room before your child falls asleep. And it may be that the child is falling asleep even before you leave the room. So at times, that's something you want to pay attention to. And so the child may seek you out when they do wake up. There is a question here. It says, does it matter where you put more sleep pressure in the day to get consolidated nights? Does homeostatic pressure carry over past naps?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that, like, naps certainly reduce homeostatic pressure. In young kids, it accumulates very quickly. That's why kids nap and grown-ups generally don't under normal circumstances. You know what? It's interesting. Like, I never heard the term wake windows until, like, a year ago. And
I'm telling you, I looked it up. I went online. I mean,
oh my God,
it's online, but I went to PubMed, just to look, like, what's the research on it? Zero.
There's nothing, in sleep. Friends, sleep doctor school, we don't learn about wake windows.
You're teaching us.
and if you haven't heard the term, wake windows are essentially a system of trying to guess when the optimal time is for a child to nap, because it is a real pain point for kids to nap. And I think part of it is they're not that tired, right? Like, and during the day, there's a lot more going on, right? Like at night, everybody's trying to sleep. It's dark out. During the day, well, it might be light in the bedroom. Your child might hear an older sibling playing. They might know they're missing out on things. You may even not be able to have a consistent nap time because you have to go pick up your older kid. I mean, again, this is the lot in life of the younger kid. And what I say to parents are certainly explore this online. It tries to capture the complexity of, well, there's longer intervals between naps as you get older. And that's true. The problem is, I feel like for some, I've met parents, these systems work very well. They're like, oh my God, this is great. This told me when to put my kid down for a nap. It was perfect. And I've had other parents say, well, wow, I feel terrible because my kid doesn't fit me waking. And I would say that I would describe it as it is a framework for thinking about napping. If you find it helpful, that's great. If it is not helpful to you, you can't figure it out because it's too complicated or it doesn't fit your child, that is also okay. I am not going to tell anyone if they find a system that works for them that they are doing the wrong thing. But it doesn't work. It doesn't, in my experience, it doesn't seem to work for everyone. And I think that every kid's a little bit different. And napping really does seem to be pretty idiosyncratic. I mean, look, everybody, even the worst sleepers I see, they all sleep at night, right? They're all mostly asleep between like 9 and 5, 9 and 5. Maybe it varies a little bit, but everybody's asleep during that period. They may wake up, you may hear from them, but napping, if your kid at a month of age, I don't know if they're going to nap at 8 in the morning or 10 in the morning or 11 in the morning or whatever. It's just, it's hard.
And for me personally, it's a lot of math.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And I think about a mom who's exhausted, which is what I love. Like, there's no like perfect system. You have to find the system that works for you. If you're like so saturated and fatigued that the math is just too complex, then maybe it's not for you. You just have to find, if it works for you, and if it does. And I know some people that swear by it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's based on the idea of sleep pressure changing over time. Unfortunately, it's really difficult to measure sleep pressure. It's mediated by a neurotransmitter called adenosine. I don't know that there is any easy way to measure this, right? Like, it's funny. Like, I feel like I've talked to some companies that are trying to kind of capture some of the complexity of napping because it really is a pain point for people, but naps are hard.
Yeah, they are. All right, so I'll take just one final question. Unfortunately, we won't, but I'm going to try to save this. I don't know if IG lets me save some of this and we could, try to address them. Do you know?
I have no idea. I got to tell you, I'm done. One time I did an Instagram live, I'm like, man, this is a winner. I pressed save and it disappeared into the ether. And I had theme music playing. I rolled in on a chair. It was pretty cool. And I was really bummed when it disappeared. But maybe hopefully you're gonna have more luck than me.
We'll see. I think I can save the video. I just don't know about the questions. These questions are so good, but they are quite a lot. But
are there more below? I'm like, mine just kind of stops. Mine just kind of stops scrolling.
Really? No, there's a question here about.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there's a question. Listen, Craig, I think we're going to have to do this again.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to. But there's a question here about when your child's nap can drop to one nap a day. Again, quick answer, short form, it varies. Most children anywhere from around 1 to 2 thereabouts.
Yeah, the range is crazy, right? Like,
yeah, it is a wide range.
I'd say if your kid's really fighting that morning nap, what you do is you try to just take it out for a couple of days and see how it goes.
Yep. All right. I'm sorry, guys. I really don't know that we'll be able to take all of them. But eczema, yes, eczema can impact your sleep. After implementing the check-in method for 3 weeks, when should it be a habit? That's a starting to
Yeah,
get long.
I like the. I think they're meaning like just coming in and maybe a modified extinction kind of thing. Yeah, I think this is a really important question because it's like if you've been doing something for 2 or 3 weeks and your kid's sleep is still bad. Like I saw somewhere online my kid's been an old friend of mine messaged me. She's like, this sleep training, my kid's been screaming for like 3 weeks. And I'm like, let's take a break from this, look for other causes, and then come back to it, right? Like, I would say that most of these methods in 2 to 3 weeks, sleep onset should be a lot easier. The nighttime awakenings can take longer to drop out, but bedtime should be easier. And if you're really stuck and you're hitting your head against the wall after a couple of weeks, you feel no progress, it is okay to press pause.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely the first call as a pediatrician, be like, what's going on? Can you check out my kid? Make sure I'm not missing something.
Yeah. Yeah. Typically,
just like,
you're like
my tripod's like, it's 5:30.
Yeah, exactly. So
my tripod's like, it's Friday afternoon. I'm done here.
I know, it's like, I'm done. Well, I would love to announce a winner for the book.
Oh my God,
can you
the envelope, please?
Woo, drum roll. So Dr. Canapari is gracefully going to be giving a book out, a giveaway.
This one I have in my hand.
This particular one, the one that's been underlined and highlighted, you get the real deal. And
Weird, sorry.
Well, the person that I would say gets it is Belle and Han. Yay! So I have your number or your DM.
Yeah, do me a favor. Just
reach out to you.
Just message your address. I'll get that in the mail next week.
Okay.
Or maybe the week after because I'm on service because you know what it's going to be like.
Oh, yes. Good luck with service.
Just like for people, on service means being in the hospital doc. It's like having a separate job on top of your regular job. Listen, I appreciate all of you guys who took the time to listen. I'm glad someone's giving a shout out to my tripod, really the hero of this whole story. And well, thanks for inviting me. This was fun. It's definitely
this was really awesome. Yes, absolutely. I think we should. If you do have teenagers who are not sleeping, because we couldn't even get to that.
Oh my God, that's a whole other thing.
I do have a sleep in teens course. Check out my website, restfulsleepmd.com/courses, and you could sign them up. That really does have some information for them that would be very helpful to get them started on good sleep. All right, this has been fabulous.
Absolutely, it's great capstone of the week.
I know.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the bottom of your screen.
Okay, all righty, all right.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Everyone. Bye.